My family used financial pressure to guide my choices until I achieved long-term stability and career growth. Then I reclaimed personal agency by choosing independence and ending unspoken expectations. You're really going to throw away everything we've built for you because of pride? My mother's voice cracked on the last word, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather armrest of her chair. I stood in their living room, the same room where I'd been summoned for every major life decision since college, and felt something inside me finally break free. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I'm 32, single, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. The truth is, I never made a single major decision on my own. Sit down, my father said, his tone measured and cold. He didn't look up from his tablet, where I knew he was reviewing stock portfolios or merger documents. Even now, in the middle of what should have been a personal conversation, he was multitasking. I remained standing. I'm not here to negotiate, I said quietly. My mother's head snapped toward me, eyes wide. She wasn't used to hearing that tone from me. None of them were. Then why are you here? My younger brother Daniel asked from the doorway. He leaned against the frame with his arms crossed, smirking like he always did when he thought he was about to witness my humiliation. Daniel was 28, married to his college sweetheart, working at Dad's firm, living in a house they'd helped him buy. He was everything they wanted me to be. Compliant, grateful, controlled. I came to tell you in person, I said, meeting each of their gazes in turn. I'm declining the partnership. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's tablet slipped slightly in his hands before he caught it, his composure cracking for just a moment. Mom's face went pale, then flushed with anger. Daniel actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Are you insane? He asked. Do you have any idea what people would kill for that opportunity? I didn't know. I'd spent the last 8 years of my life working toward it, after all. But that was the problem. It was never what I wanted. It was what they wanted. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Dad said, setting his tablet down with deliberate care. His voice was dangerously calm. You're walking away from a senior partnership at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the country. A position we spent considerable resources helping you obtain. Because why exactly? The way he said, we made my stomach turn. He wasn't wrong, technically. They had spent resources. Money for my Ivy League education. Connections for my internships. Influence for my job placements. Every step of my career had their fingerprints all over it. Because it's not my life, I said. It's the life you designed for me. Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. How dare you? She whispered, her voice shaking. After everything we sacrificed for you. There it was. The word they'd been using as a weapon my entire adult life. Sacrifice. I never asked you to sacrifice anything, I said, and I hated how my voice wavered. You chose to invest in a version of me that would make you look good. That's not the same thing. Daniel pushed off from the doorway, his smirk gone. You ungrateful piece of... Enough, Dad cut him off with a raised hand. He stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket out of habit even though we were at home. You want to make your own choices? Fine. But understand this. You walk away from this partnership, you walk away from us. No more safety net. No more connections. You're on your own. I'd expected this. I'd been preparing for this exact conversation for months. Ever since the night I'd sat alone in my expensive apartment and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision purely because I wanted to. I understand, I said. Good. Dad replied, already turning back to his chair. Then this conversation is over. But I wasn't finished. There's one more thing, I said. They all looked at me with varying degrees of annoyance and confusion. I'm paying you back. Every dollar you spent on my education, every gift, every investment. I've already started calculating it. I'll have a payment plan drawn up by the end of the week. Mom actually gasped. Dad's expression finally showed genuine emotion. Shock, quickly followed by something that looked almost like respect. Daniel just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't be serious, Mom said. I'm completely serious, I replied. You want to frame this as a transaction? Fine. Let's make it an actual transaction. Once I've paid you back in full, we're even. No more guilt. No more obligation. That's not how family works, she said, her voice breaking. That's exactly how our family works, Mom, I said gently. It's how it's always worked. You just never expected me to flip the script. I turned and walked toward the front door. My hands were shaking, but I kept them steady enough to turn the handle. You'll regret this, Daniel called after me. In 6 months, you'll come crawling back. I paused in the doorway, looking back at him over my shoulder. Maybe, I admitted, but at least it'll be my regret. My choice. My life. I closed the door behind me and stood on the front steps, breathing in the cold November air. My phone was already buzzing in my pocket. I knew it would be messages from extended family members, already alerted to my betrayal. The family network moved fast when there was drama to discuss. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. I got in my car and drove back to the city, my mind racing through everything that had led to this moment. It wasn't one thing. It never is. It was 1,000 small compromises that had added up over the years until I'd looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the person staring back. The first compromise came when I was 18, choosing my college major. I wanted to study architecture. I'd spent my entire childhood building things, sketching buildings, losing myself in the idea of creating spaces where people could live and work and feel something. Architecture is a hobby, not a career, Dad had said, barely looking up from his dinner. Study business. Get your MBA. You can design buildings as a side project once you're established. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was successful, wealthy, respected. He must know what he was talking about. So I studied business. I hated every minute of it, but I was good at it. That was almost worse. Being good at something you hate is its own special kind of torture because it removes your excuse to quit. The second compromise came when I was 24, fresh out of business school. I'd been offered 2 positions. One at a mid-sized firm in Seattle, working on sustainable business practices and green energy consulting. The other at Rothman & Associates, the prestigious consulting firm where my father had connections, working with Fortune 500 companies on maximizing shareholder value. The Seattle position sounds interesting, I'd said carefully over family dinner. It's a niche market, growing field. I think I could really make an impact. Mom had set down her fork with a little too much force. Seattle is across the country. You'd be so far away. It's a glorified startup, Dad added. You want to waste your MBA on some feel-good project that'll probably fold in 5 years? Or do you want to build real wealth, real influence, real security? Daniel, fresh out of undergrad and already working at Dad's firm, had smirked at me from across the table. Sounds like someone wants to hug trees for a living. I'd taken the position at Rothman & Associates. I told myself it was the smart choice, the practical choice. The Seattle job probably wouldn't have worked out anyway, right? The third compromise, the fourth, the fifth, they all blurred together after a while. Where to live? Close to family, of course. What kind of car to drive? Something that projects success. How to invest my money? Through Dad's financial advisor, naturally. Whether to date someone. Only if they came from the right background, the right schools, the right trajectory. That last one had cost me someone I actually cared about. Her name was Rachel. We'd met at a coffee shop, of all places, 3 years ago. She was a teacher, passionate about her work, completely unimpressed by my job title or my car or my expensive watch. For 6 months, I kept her separate from my family. I told myself it was because I wanted to keep something pure, something that was just mine. But really, I was afraid. Afraid of what they'd say. Afraid of how they'd judge her. Afraid of how quickly they'd try to end it. When I finally introduced her at a family dinner, I watched in real time as they dismissed her. Not cruelly. They were too sophisticated for that. But with subtle questions about her long-term goals and pointed observations about lifestyle compatibility and gentle suggestions that maybe I should keep my options open. Rachel had been quiet on the drive home that night. They don't think I'm good enough for you, she'd said finally. That's not true, I'd lied. It's completely true, she'd replied, looking out the window. And the worst part is, I'm not sure you disagreed with them. We'd broken up 2 weeks later. I hadn't fought for her. I told myself it was because we wanted different things, because the timing wasn't right, because it just wasn't meant to be. All lies. The truth was simpler and more pathetic. I'd let my family's disapproval seep into my own mind until I couldn't separate my feelings from theirs anymore. That was 2 years ago. I hadn't dated anyone seriously since. Every time I met someone, I found myself running through a mental checklist that wasn't even mine. Would she impress my parents? Would she fit into their world? Would she make me look good at family events? It was exhausting. 3 months ago, everything changed. I was working on a project for a major client, some soulless merger that would result in 3,000 layoffs, but would boost quarterly earnings by 8%. We were in a conference room, running the numbers, and my boss Richard was walking the client through our recommendations. The key, Richard said, gesturing at the presentation, is to frame the restructuring as strategic optimization rather than cost-cutting. The optics matter. The client, a silver-haired CEO who probably made more in a month than most people made in a decade, nodded approvingly. I like it. Clean, efficient, and it keeps the board happy. I sat there looking at the slides I'd helped create, listening to them discuss 3,000 human lives like they were line items on a spreadsheet, and felt something crack inside my chest. This was what I was good at. This was what I'd been trained for. This was what 8 years of my life had built toward, and I hated every single second of it. After the meeting, Richard pulled me aside. "Great work on this one," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "The partners have been impressed with your performance this quarter. Keep it up, and you're looking at a senior partnership announcement by spring." It was everything I was supposed to want. Everything my family had pushed me toward. The culmination of their investment. "Thanks," I managed. That night, I went home to my apartment in a building I'd bought because it was a smart investment in a neighborhood I didn't particularly like because it was up and coming. I sat on my couch that I'd purchased from a designer my mother recommended because it was timeless and elegant, even though I found it uncomfortable. I looked around at my life and realized I couldn't point to a single thing that was truly mine. Not one thing that I'd chosen purely because I wanted it. Not because it made strategic sense or impressed the right people or fit into some long-term plan I hadn't even created. That was the night I started making my plan. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything my family had ever spent on me. Tuition, room, and board, the car they'd bought me for graduation, the loan for my apartment down payment that we all pretended I'd pay back someday, the connections that had gotten me interviews. I created a spreadsheet. Line by line, year by year, I calculated my debt to them. It came to just over $400,000. A ridiculous sum, an impossible sum, but also, somehow, a liberating sum. Because if I could pay it back, I could be free. I started researching what I'd need to do. I'd been making good money at Rothman for years, and because I'd been living according to their expectations rather than my own, I'd actually managed to save quite a bit. Not $400,000, but enough to make a dent. I ran the numbers over and over. If I declined the partnership and took a different job, something that paid less but didn't slowly kill my soul, could I still pay them back in a reasonable time frame? It would be tight. I'd have to downsize significantly. Cheaper apartment, sell the car, cut out all the expensive habits I'd developed. But it was possible, and the more I thought about it, the more possible didn't just mean feasible. It meant necessary. I spent weeks researching alternative careers. I reached out to old professors, to former classmates who'd taken different paths, to anyone who might give me honest advice about starting over at 32. One name kept coming up in the sustainable development world. Marcus Chun, founder of a mid-sized consulting firm that worked exclusively with companies trying to genuinely improve their environmental and social impact. Not greenwashing. Actual change. I'd heard of his firm before, had even looked at their website 3 years ago when I was feeling particularly dissatisfied. But I'd never seriously considered applying. They paid less than Rothman. The prestige wasn't the same. My father would have a stroke if I told him I was leaving to work in do-gooder consulting. But now, with my spreadsheet of debt and my plan for freedom, those objections didn't seem to matter as much. I sent Marcus an email. I didn't expect a response. He replied within an hour. "I remember reviewing your resume 3 years ago," his email said. "You had impressive credentials, but I could tell your heart wasn't in this kind of work. What's changed?" I wrote back honestly. More honestly than I'd been with anyone in years. I told him about the merger project, about the moment in the conference room, about realizing I'd spent 8 years becoming someone I didn't like. His response came the next morning. "Come in for an interview. No promises, but I appreciate honesty. It's rare in this industry." The interview was nothing like any interview I'd done before. Marcus didn't ask about my greatest strengths or where I saw myself in 5 years. Instead, he asked me what I actually cared about. What kept me up at night? What I'd do if money wasn't a factor. I told him about the architecture dreams I'd abandoned at 18. About Rachel and how I'd let her go without a fight. About my family and their expectations and the spreadsheet of debt I was compiling. "That's one hell of a spreadsheet," he said when I finished. "Why pay them back? Most people would just cut ties and move on." "Because I need to prove something," I admitted. "To them or to yourself?" he asked. I'd thought about that question every day since. Marcus offered me a position. Senior consultant, specializing in corporate restructuring with a focus on preserving jobs while improving sustainability. The pay was 60% of what I was making at Rothman, about 40% of what I'd make as a senior partner. It was perfect. I accepted immediately, but I didn't tell my family. Not yet. I wanted to have everything in place first. I found a smaller apartment in a neighborhood I actually liked, full of artists and small businesses and people who didn't care what kind of car you drove. I sold the BMW and bought a used Toyota. I went through my closet and sold half my suits, keeping only what I'd actually need. Every dollar I freed up went into a dedicated account labeled Freedom Fund. The number grew slowly but steadily. I calculated that with my new salary and reduced expenses, I could pay my family back in full within 7 years. Maybe 6 if I was aggressive about it. It felt like a long time. It also felt like nothing compared to spending the rest of my life under their control. I gave my notice at Rothman a month ago. Richard was shocked. "You're making a massive mistake," he said, genuine concern in his voice. "You're on track for senior partner. You know how many people would kill for that?" I'd heard that question before. "I appreciate everything I've learned here," I said carefully. "But I need to try something different." "This is about that sustainability firm, isn't it?" he asked, and I realized the industry was smaller than I thought. Marcus Chen's outfit. I've heard of them. They do fine work if you're into that sort of thing, but it's not the same league as Rothman. "I know," I said. "Then why?" I looked at Richard, at this man who'd mentored me for years, who genuinely thought he was looking out for my best interests. "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my career helping people frame layoffs as strategic optimization," I said quietly. His face hardened. "That's naive. That's the business world. You think Chen doesn't make tough decisions." "I'm sure he does," I replied. "But I'd rather make tough decisions I can live with than easy decisions that slowly kill me." He didn't understand. How could he? He'd never been where I was. I worked my last day 2 weeks ago. My coworkers threw me a small goodbye party, confusion written all over their faces. No one leaves on the verge of senior partner. Not voluntarily. I'd moved into my new apartment the week before. It was a third of the size of my old place, with scuffed hardwood floors and a kitchen that was more functional than impressive. I loved it immediately. I hung curtains I'd picked out myself without consulting anyone. I bought a used couch from a neighborhood furniture store that was comfortable rather than elegant. I set up a small drafting table by the window where I could sketch in the evenings if I wanted to. Small things. Meaningless things, maybe. But they were mine. I'd started at Marcus's firm yesterday. The office was smaller, less polished, full of people who seemed genuinely excited about their work rather than grimly determined to succeed. My first project was helping a manufacturing company redesign their supply chain to reduce waste without eliminating jobs. It was complicated. It was challenging. It was exactly what I needed. But I still hadn't told my family. I knew I had to. I knew the conversation would be brutal. But I kept putting it off, this last piece of the puzzle. Until yesterday afternoon, when my mother called. "We're having dinner Sunday," she announced without preamble. "Your father wants to discuss the partnership announcement timeline." My stomach dropped. They didn't know. Rothman hadn't told them. Of course they hadn't. Why would they? "Mom," I started. 6 o'clock, she continued. "Don't be late. This is important." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat in my new apartment, looking at my drafting table, at my comfortable couch, at the life I was slowly building for myself. And I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. Which brought me to today, to their living room, to the conversation that had just exploded. I drove back to my apartment in a daze, my phone still buzzing constantly. Text from Daniel calling me selfish and stupid. A long message from my mother about betrayal and disappointment. Radio silence from my father, which was somehow worse. But also, mixed in, a few unexpected messages. One from my cousin Andrea. "I heard what happened. I think you're brave." One from Richard at Rothman. "I didn't agree with your choice, but I respect it. Good luck." And one from Rachel. I saw the family group chat before they kicked me out. "I'm proud of you." I hadn't spoken to Rachel in 2 years. The fact that she'd still been in the family chat at all was surprising. The fact that she'd reached out was more surprising. The fact that her message made me tear up was most surprising of all. I sat in my apartment that evening, eating takeout from the Thai place down the street that would never impress my parents, but made incredible pad CEW. My phone kept buzzing. The family group chat I was apparently still in was exploding with messages. Aunts and uncles weighing in. Cousins offering opinions. Everyone suddenly an expert on my life and choices. I watched the messages pile up for a few minutes, then did something I'd never done before. I muted the chat. Not left it. Just muted it. Small step. But it felt enormous. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet. $423,000, to be exact. My current savings, $98,000. My new annual salary, $115,000 before taxes. My projected monthly payment toward the debt, $3,000. 7 years and 2 months until freedom, if everything went according to plan. I stared at the numbers, and for the first time, they didn't feel overwhelming. They felt like progress. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. Is this the ungrateful son who just walked away from his family's investment? I recognized my Uncle Robert's voice, dripping with sarcasm. Uncle Robert, I said flatly. I just got off the phone with your father, he continued. He's devastated. Your mother is heartbroken. And frankly, I think you've lost your mind. Is there a question in there? I asked. What the hell are you thinking? He demanded. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? I'm not throwing anything away, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. I'm paying them back and building my own life. That's not how family works, he said, echoing my mother's words. Then maybe it should be, I replied, and hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly proud of myself. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, voicemail. After the 5th call, I turned my phone off completely. Tomorrow I could deal with the fallout. Tonight, I just wanted to exist in my own space, making my own choices, without anyone's voice in my head but my own. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find 47 notifications. I scrolled through them quickly. Most were variations on the same theme: disappointment, anger, confusion. But there were a few that surprised me. Andrea had sent another message. Aunt Claire is furious with you. I've never seen her so angry. It's actually kind of impressive. My old college roommate Trevor heard through the grapevine what happened. Drinks this week. And Marcus, saw you're having a rough day on social media. HR is here if you need anything. Otherwise, see you tomorrow for the client meeting. The fact that my family drama had made it to social media was mortifying and somehow not surprising. I checked and found that Daniel had posted something vague on his feed about family loyalty and understanding sacrifice. The comments were full of relatives agreeing with him. I closed the app without responding. At work that week, I threw myself into the project. The manufacturing company was family-owned, third generation, and the current CEO genuinely cared about his employees. My grandfather started this company with 5 people, he told us in our first meeting. We're up to 200 now. I know every single person by name. I'm not laying anyone off unless there's absolutely no other option. It was refreshing. It was also challenging, because the company's margins were razor-thin and the traditional advice would be to cut labor costs immediately. But Marcus had built his reputation on finding creative solutions. What if we restructure the supply chain? I suggested, pulling up the analysis I've been working on. If we can reduce material waste by 20% and negotiate better terms with suppliers, we can improve margins without touching headcount. The CEO leaned forward, interested. Show me. We spent 3 hours going through possibilities. By the end, we had a plan that would take 6 months to implement, but could save the company without sacrificing jobs. This is good work, Marcus said as we drove back to the office. How are you holding up otherwise? I'd been deliberately not mentioning the family drama at work. I'm fine, I said automatically. He gave me a look. I run a small firm. Word travels fast. I know what you're dealing with. It's complicated, I admitted. Family usually is, he said. But you made the right choice. Not the easy choice, but the right one. I wanted to believe him. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the text messages had slowed to a trickle. My parents had gone completely silent. Daniel sent the occasional passive-aggressive message about family events I was suddenly not invited to. But the extended family had mostly moved on to other dramas. I'd met Trevor for drinks and caught him up on everything. So you're really doing it, he'd said, shaking his head in amazement. You're actually breaking free. Trying to, I'd corrected. That's more than most people do, he pointed out. He wasn't wrong. I'd started therapy too, something I'd been avoiding for years. My therapist, Dr. Patel, had listened to my story without judgment. What do you think you'll feel when you make that final payment? She'd asked. Free, I'd answered immediately. And what will you do with that freedom? I'd thought about that question a lot. I don't know yet, I'd admitted. That's okay, she'd said. Not knowing is part of the process. It was now 6 weeks since the confrontation. I was settling into my new life, my new rhythm, my new sense of self. The work at Marcus's firm was challenging but meaningful. My apartment felt more like home every day. I'd even started sketching again, just for myself, filling a notebook with building designs that would never be built but brought me joy anyway. Then my phone rang. Mom. I stared at her name on the screen for several rings before answering. Hello. We need to talk, she said. Her voice was strained but controlled. Okay, I said carefully. Not over the phone. Come to the house. Saturday afternoon. Mom, I don't think. Please, she said, and the please caught me off guard. My mother didn't say please often. I hesitated, then agreed. 2:00. Just you. Not Dad or Daniel. She paused. Fine. Just me. Saturday arrived too quickly. I drove to their house with a knot in my stomach, unsure what to expect. Mom answered the door herself, which was unusual. They had staff for that. Thank you for coming, she said formally. We sat in the living room, the same room where everything had exploded 6 weeks ago. She'd made tea, which sat untouched on the coffee table between us. Your father doesn't know you're here, she said finally. He'd be furious if he knew I reached out. Then why did you? I asked. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Deep, genuine sadness. Because I've been thinking, she said slowly, about what you said, about us treating your life like a transaction. I waited, not sure where this was going. You weren't entirely wrong, she continued, and I could see how much it cost her to admit that. We did push you. We did use our resources as leverage. We told ourselves we were helping you, giving you opportunities we never had. But, I prompted gently. But we never asked if it was what you actually wanted, she finished. We assumed that because we were giving you the best of everything, you'd be grateful. Happy. Successful. I am successful, I said. Just not in the way you defined it. She nodded slowly. Your father won't accept that. Maybe he never will. He sees this as a rejection of everything he worked for, everything he built. And you? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm trying to understand, she said finally. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like we failed you somehow, or you failed us, and I can't figure out which it is. Maybe it's neither, I suggested. Maybe we just wanted different things and nobody was willing to say it out loud until now. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. Are you really going to pay us back? The full amount? Yes, I said firmly. It'll take time, but yes. That's not necessary, she said quietly. We never expected. But you did expect, I interrupted gently. Maybe not repayment in money, but in choices, in compliance, in becoming who you wanted me to be. This way is cleaner. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. I don't want to lose you. My chest tightened. You don't have to, I said. But our relationship can't be conditional anymore. It can't be contingent on me making the choices you approve of. What if I can't do that? She asked. What if I can't just support you blindly in choices I think are mistakes? I'm not asking you to support me blindly, I said. I'm asking you to respect that they're my choices to make. You can disagree. You can tell me you think I'm wrong. But you can't use money or guilt or family pressure to force me to change course. She was quiet for a long time. I need to think about that, she said finally. Okay, I replied. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, drinking our tea. It wasn't resolution. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. A small crack in the wall. A possibility of a different kind of relationship, someday. When I left, she hugged me at the door. Brief, awkward, but genuine. Be careful, she said. I will, I promised. And maybe call sometimes. Let me know how you're doing. I can do that, I agreed. Driving home, I felt lighter somehow. Not fixed, not healed, but lighter. I pulled up to my apartment and sat in my car for a moment, looking up at the building. My phone buzzed. Rachel, coffee sometime, if you're up for it. No pressure. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. I'd like that. Her response came immediately. How's Saturday? I smiled. Saturday works. I got out of my car and walked up to my apartment, to my comfortable couch and my drafting table and my life that was slowly, messily, painfully becoming my own. 7 years until the debt was paid. 7 years until I was completely free. But sitting in my apartment that evening, sketching a building that would never exist except in my imagination, I realized something. I was already free. The money was just a formality. The real freedom had come the moment I'd stood in my parents' living room and chosen myself. Everything after that was just details. My phone buzzed again. The family group chat, unmuted. A message from Andrea. Thanksgiving at my place this year. You're invited if you want to come. No judgment, no drama, just food. I thought about it for a moment, then replied. I'll bring dessert. Small steps. But they were my steps. And that made all the difference.